The year is 1571. Europe trembles. City after city passes into Ottoman hands, and the crescent banner stretches across the Mediterranean like a storm front swallowing the horizon. Rumors travel faster than ships. An armada is coming, not a fleet and empire floating on water. More than 200 war galleys, tens of thousands of seasoned warriors, janissaries, sailors, archers, men who have conquered kingdoms and burned them into memory. Against this rising tide, Christian Europe is fractured, exhausted, and terrified. But fear has a strange habit. Sometimes it unites those who would never stand together. Pope Pius V, an old man whose voice cracks from fasting and prayer, sends out a desperate call. He begs every Christian nation to put aside their arguments and face the oncoming darkness as one. Most ignore him. Only a handful answer. Spain, Venice, the Knights of Malta, a few scattered Italian states, and a few others. A small, fragile coalition that calls itself the Holy League. And at its center stands a man barely in his 20s, Don John of Austria, commander chosen not for age or rank, but for the fire in his soul. He looks across the harbors of Messina, where his fleet waits. They are outnumbered, outgunned, outrained. The Ottoman fleet is larger, faster, and cruelly efficient. Yet, Don John does not tremble. God has given us the honor, he says, of defending all of Christendom. No one sleeps the night before departure. Priests move between the ships, blessing cannons and wounded timbers. Soldiers sharpen blades that they know may never taste victory. Sailors whisper prayers, rosaries wrapped so tight around their hands that beads crack. The wind is dead still. The sea feels heavy, like it knows what's coming. And then, just before dawn, the lookout shouts a single word: sails. Dark shapes begin to rise over the horizon like mountains of moving shadow. The Ottoman Armada has arrived. The Holy League is trapped between fear and faith, but they choose faith. They raise a banner larger than any other. The image of Christ crucified, lifted high above the flagship. Its cloth trembles in the first breath of a new wind. A wind no one expected, a wind blowing in their favor. The wind shifts, is slow at first, just a sigh across the water. The wind was then stronger, then undeniable. The Christian fleet lifts its sails and begins to glide with purpose, while the Ottoman Armada fights the sudden breeze. Their formation wavers. Their lines bend. Their speed dies. Don John looks to the sky. God has spoken, he murmurs. Across the decks, men fall to their knees. Even the roughest mercenaries sense it. Something greater is moving, something ancient, something holy. But prayer gives way to preparation. The galleys tighten formation center, left wing, right wing each, commanded by men who understand the stakes of this day. On the right side fights Andrea Doria, seasoned and silent. On the left, Barbarigo, whose Venetian blood runs hot with vengeance for every city the Ottomans took. Don John stands in the center, where the clash will be the fiercest. Before he gives one order that spreads across the fleet like lightning. No man is to break formation. No one pursues glory. Today we fight as one. And then, the strangest thing happens. The sea, usually loud, restless, alive, goes quiet. So quiet that you can hear the creaking of oars, the trembling breaths of thousands of men, the heartbeat of a world holding still. Then the drums begin. Ottoman war, drums deep, thunderous. They echo across the Gulf like giants marching underwater. Their rowers chant in perfect rhythm, and the massive crescent banners ripple like living fire. At the very front rides Ali Pasha, commander of the Ottoman Navy. Confident, ruthless, undefeated, he raises his jeweled sword toward the Holy League, and in the rising sunlight, his fleet glows, red-painted by the dawn like an omen. A Venetian officer whispers, "They are countless." A Spanish soldier answers, "Then we will count them in heaven." But Don John does not whisper. He lifts the standard of Christ above his head, and his voice strikes the silence like a bell. Forward, for God and for Christendom. A roar bursts from every Christian galley. Cannons thunder, drums explode, oars dig into the ocean with the fury of 10,000 arms. The sea erupts into chaos. Thousands of arrows rise like a black storm cloud. Cannons boom from both sides, sending fire, smoke, and splinters exploding into the sky. Galleys ram into each other with the force of earthquakes, iron hooks locking ships together until the deck becomes a floating battlefield. And the Christians, outnumbered, outmatched, fight like men who have already given heaven their names. The Ottoman left wing pushes hard, trying to circle and crush the Holy League's flank. Barbarigo falls back, shielding his men with shields soaked in the sea. The Ottoman center slams into Don John's flagship, and the deck explodes into hand-to-hand combat. Steel meets steel. Muskets fire inches from armor. Men fall overboard and vanish beneath the red water. And yet, every time the Christians begin to falter, every time the Ottoman push grows too strong, that same strange wind pushes the Holy League forward again, as if the sea itself refuses to abandon them. The battle reaches its heart. The Christian center and the Ottoman center are now locked so tightly that the two fleets move as one single, massive, groaning machine of wood, fire, and blood. Don John's flagship, the Real, slams directly into Ali Pasha, the Sultana. The two greatest commanders at Lepanto are now only a few steps apart, separated by nothing but bodies and smoke. Arrows rain from the sky like burning hail. Musketeers reload until their fingers blister. Cannons roar so close that men's ears bleed. Ottoman janissaries illit, disciplined, feared storm over the rails of the Sultana. Scimitars raised, armor shining, they crash onto the deck of the Real with the certainty of victory. They outnumbered Don John's guards 3-1. For a moment, the Christian line bends. For a moment, the Ottoman crescent looks unstoppable. And then, a single blast of wind hits the Real's sails. The ship surges forward like a living beast. The Sultana jerks sideways, losing momentum, losing angle, losing the advantage. The janissaries already leaping mid-air land awkwardly, stumbling, losing formation. Don John sees his moment. He charges, not from behind his guards, not from safety, but at the very front, sword raised high, cloak billowing like a banner of defiance. For Christ, for the cross. His voice cuts through the battle like a blade. Christian Marines surge behind him in a wave that crashes into the heart of the Ottoman deck. It is brutal, desperate, close enough that breath and blood mix in the air. Steel rings, bodies fall. The decks grow slick and red. Ali Pasha, refusing to retreat, struggles to rally his men. He shouts, commands drowned by cannon fire, by screams, by the crack of breaking timber. But the tide has turned. Not metaphorically, literally. The wind now blows fully behind the Christian fleet, pushing their center forward and forcing the Ottoman ships back, breaking their neat crescent formation piece by piece. On the Christian left wing, despite being overwhelmed, Agostino Barbarigo holds the line with a shield soaked in arrows. He pushes back every attempt at encirclement until an arrow pierces his eye. He collapses, but not before screaming one last order: "Do not yield the line." And his men obey. On the right wing, Doria finally outmaneuvers the Ottoman flank, slamming his galleys sideways into the enemy and trapping them against shallow waters. The crescent begins to buckle, tenet twists. Then, it snaps. Back at the center, Don John leaps onto the Sultana. His boots hit the deck of the Ottoman flagship with the certainty of a hammer striking an anvil. He fights his way to Ali Pasha. Their blades clash once, twice, a third time. Then Don John's guards burst through behind him, and the weight of the Christian assault is too much. Ali Pasha falls, struck down on his own deck. For a brief moment, the fighting stops. On both sides, men stare almost unsure if what they see is real. Then Don John commands something that no man at Lepanto will ever forget. Ali Pasha's banner, the symbol of the Ottoman fleet, is torn down. The Christian standard is raised in its place. A roar explodes across the ocean, louder than cannon fire. Every Christian galley sees it. Every Ottoman galley fears it. And suddenly, for the first time in the battle, the Muslim fleet begins to break. The sea becomes a storm of retreating ships, flaming wrecks, sinking galleys, and desperate men jumping overboard to escape the slaughter. The entire horizon turns red, the water, the sky, the reflections of burning masts. Lepanto is no longer a battle. It is a miracle unfolding in real time. The death of Ali Pasha doesn't just weaken Ottoman morale, it shatters it. Across the battlefield, his flagships fall spreads like wildfire. Signals break down, orders vanish in the smoke. Commanders who spent decades rising through the ranks suddenly find themselves surrounded, outflanked, or cut off from their own men. For the first time in living memory, the unstoppable Ottoman navy looks mortal. On the Christian right, Admiral Doria senses the shift immediately. He had been pushed hard, threatened with encirclement, stretched thin across the wave's butt. Now the enemy in front of him hesitates. Hesitation on a battlefield is a death sentence. Doria raises his arm. The trumpets sound. Every Christian galley under his command turns as one. What follows is a maneuver so precise that later historians will call it impossible. 30 Christian ships cut through more than 80 Ottoman galleys. Not with superior numbers, not with superior firepower, but with superior timing. The wind, once against them, now fills their sails. The sun, once in their eyes, now blinds the Ottoman archers. Every natural advantage shifts, just as if the battle itself has chosen sides. The Ottoman right wing collapses, ships slamming into one another as they retreat toward shallow waters, where many run aground. On the left, Boberigo's death has only made his men more ruthless. Their shields are splintered, their armor is dented, their decks are covered in blood, but they refuse to give a single inch. And when they finally see Ali Pasha as a banner fall, they explode forward with a fury even the Janissaries have never witnessed. They board ship after ship, overwhelming the Ottoman flank with raw, unbroken determination. Captains throw down their swords. Archers abandon their posts. Entire crews leap into the sea to escape. By now, the Ottoman crescent, once the most feared formation on the Mediterranean, has been ripped apart so completely that the shape doesn't exist anymore. It isn't a fleet, it's a graveyard floating on water. Back at the heart of the battle, Don John turns the reel toward what remains of the Ottoman command. He pushes forward through splintered masts, burning ships, drifting corpses, and broken oars carpeting the surface of the sea. He raises his sword, points it at the surviving Ottoman captains, and gives a single, merciless order. Advance, leave none behind. Christian galleys surge forward in a wall of wood and iron. Every ship they hit becomes another wreck. Every deck they board becomes another victory. Every Ottoman banner they tear down is another sign that the impossible is happening. The most feared navy on earth is losing. Then, as if to make the victory complete, the wind shifts again. More than 100 Ottoman galezos meant as reinforcements are suddenly trapped. The gusts that once pushed them forward now slammed them backward, scattering them, preventing formation, turning their advance into chaos. It is the third and final wind shift of the day, the third and final divine signature on a battle that should have been unwinnable. By late afternoon, the sea is unrecognizable. Smoke covers the horizon. Burning ships crackle as their masts fall into glowing embers. Bodies drift past shattered hulls, and the sun glints off the waves, not with gold, but with red. Lepanto is over. The Christian world has won. Don John stands on the deck of the reel and whispers, "The cross has triumphed." By sunset, the guns fall silent. The smoke thins, the screams fade, and a stillness settles over the wateress. Stillness so heavy, so absolute, that every survivor will remember it for the rest of their lives. Lepanto is no longer a battlefield. It is a turning point written in blood. More than 200 Ottoman ships lie destroyed, captured, or burning. 30,000 of their best soldiers and sailors are dead or drifting. The Janissaries, once considered invincible, have been shattered so completely that their corpses fill the decks of captured galleys, and the remaining Ottoman commanders flee. Not in formation, not with dignity, but as broken men escaping a disaster they cannot comprehend. For centuries, the Mediterranean had been an Ottoman lake. But after Lepanto, it belongs to no one. The spell of Ottoman naval supremacy in Broken since the fall of Constantinople has been shattered in a single day. But perhaps the most powerful moment comes after the battle. Christian sailors begin boarding captured Ottoman ships not to loot, not to celebrate, but to break the chains of the enslaved rowers below deck. They find 12,000 Christians chained to benches, starved, beaten, some only skin and bone. When the chains are broken, the men fall to their knees, not from devotion, but because their legs have forgotten how to stand. Some weep, some kiss the hands of their liberators, others whisper prayers. They thought they would never speak again, and when Don John orders their wounds bandaged, their bodies washed, their dignity restored, the entire fleet erupts into a roar of victory, not for conquest, but for liberation. This is what separates the two worlds. One empire chains men, the other frees them. Far away in Rome, Pope Pius V, who had begged Christendom to unite, he receives the news. According to multiple accounts, he bursts into tears. Then he stands in St. Peter's Square and speaks 7 words that echo through history. There was a victory at Lepanto. He doesn't say battle, he says victory, because he knows what the world has just gained. Back at sea, Don John of Austria kneels in his cabin. He doesn't thank fortune. He doesn't praise his own strategy. He thanks God, the Virgin Mary, and every man who fought beside him. The last words he writes that night in his journal are simple, not by our strength, but by his hand. And the consequences, immediate, permanent, world-changing. The Ottomans, who had expanded non-stop for centuries, never again launch a major offensive naval campaign in the Mediterranean. Their aura of invincibility evaporates. Christendom realizes something it hadn't believed for a long time. The Islamic Empire can be stopped. Historians agree, if the Christians had lost at Lepanto, the entire Mediterranean, Italy, Spain, the Papal States, the islands would have been wide open. But because a patchwork of kingdoms finally stood together, civilization held, faith endured, and Europe remained free. As night falls over the ruins of the Ottoman fleet, torches flicker across Christian decks. Men kneel, rosaries hang from splintered rails. Priests lift their hands in blessing, and there, on the quiet waves, surrounded by wreckage, the sailors of Christendom begin to sing the Te Deum. Their voices rise into the night, a hymn of thanksgiving for a victory that should never have been possible. A victory won not just by steel, but by providence. In battles like Lepanto, our ancestors carved their names into history, not with pride, but with sacrifice. They stood when they had every reason to fall. They fought when the world said it was impossible. And because of them, you and I still live in a world where the cross stands tall. If you believe these stories must never be forgotten, if you believe the courage of our forefathers deserves to be remembered, honored, passed on, then help this mission grow. Like the video, leave a comment for the algorithm, and subscribe so the next chapter of forgotten Christian history reaches more people who need to hear it. This is not just entertainment. This is remembrance. This is legacy. This is faith. Christ is Lord. And history belongs to those who refuse to forget him.